Good evening, Mayor and Council. As the Mayor introduced, this is a final report on the feasibility and concept assessment of the Styner and White and Highway 8 pedestrian and bicycle underpass. I just provide a little bit of background. The pedestrian underpass has been under discussion near the Styner and White Avenue intersection with Highway 8 for the last approximately 4 years since a student class worked on the project. Currently, Highway 8 serves as a significant barrier to access to the Paradise Path. The majority of the city's residential properties and development is north of Highway 8, and the Paradise Path comes through the city east-west and is located south of Highway 8. As I mentioned, in 2007, Professor Fritz Fiedler, senior civil engineering class, conducted an assessment of the underpass. That class study indicated that it was feasible, and they did not anticipate it to have adverse impacts to flood events in the surrounding area. And that information was conveyed to the task force and to the Parks and Rec Commission at that point in time, and to the City Council. This underpass was identified as a high priority project in the city's recent long-range transportation plan as a identified crossing improvement on Highway 8, and was reported it's been the #1 priority for the Paradise Path Task Force, or should I say Paradise or Moscow Pathways Commission now, as a long-term priority project for them. Just a few facts that the council may not be aware about mobility in Moscow. The community does place a high value upon walking and biking for transportation needs. If you were to look at recent surveys, this is from the American Community Survey from 2006 through 10, 5-year estimates. We've had 19.6% of the residents identified walking as their primary means of transportation to work. That's compared to 2.9% on the national average. Also, 5.7% of the residents bike to work as their primary means of transportation, and that's compared to 0.6% on the national average. Moscow actually, our current rate of walking to work ranks number 11th in the nation for cities with population of 20,000 to 99,000, just under 100,000 population. So we're number 9 in the nation for rate of walking as the primary mode of transportation to work. As I mentioned before, it was identified as an impediment in the transportation plan. The pathway there is indicated on the green line. Obviously, the highway is located north of the pathway and serves as a barrier to a large portion of the developed portion of the community that is due north of that location. What we're looking at and what we're talking about tonight is really kind of central to that point, and that's that crossing enhancement that was identified in the transportation plan at that intersection of Styner, White, and Highway 8. Again, it was identified there as the orange dot is identified as a priority project in crossing enhancement of the highway. As the council is aware, in October 6th of 2014, the council approved of a study to confirm the findings of the student project in 3 phases. Phase 1 was to validate the hydrologic and hydraulic assessments of the bridge structure to verify that it could with the path addition that there would be no rise in flood events, which is a requirement for FEMA whenever you're doing any work in the floodway. Phase 2 of the project was to assess the constructability of an underpass and establishment an estimate of cost of construction of the underpass. And Phase 3 included an assessment of the environmental impacts and specifically wetland delineation to understand any mitigation that may be required as part of the project. The Topographics Engineering was selected to conduct the assessment. And on November 3rd of last year, staff presented the Phase 1 findings, which indicated that there were no adverse flood impacts. And at that point in time, the council approved moving forward with Phases 2 and 3 to complete the design, concept design and the wetland delineation work. As I mentioned, under the Phase 1 assessment, the study indicated that the pathway would have no impact upon flood events. Actually, there's some lowered elevations in a few instances due to smoothing of some of the bank edges, but both from the 2, 10, 25, 50, and to 100-year event, the pre-project and post-project conditions are virtually unchanged. Phase 1 did indicate that the pathway would likely be inundated an average of 3.4 days per year, with an average consecutive inundation of 1.9 days per year. So it would get wet at periods of time, but that'd be happening at a time where there might be a little bit lower pedestrian bicycle activity and be for fairly short duration events. This is instantaneous flow charts here from 2010 through just the 17th today. You can see that this red line indicates the 100 CFS. That is essentially the flow rate at the gauge station, at which point the pathway will be starting to get wet. You can see we had two little peaks here just here last week when we had the high water events during the snow melt and heavy rain events. So there were short periods of time here in last week when that pathway would be covered with water. But you can see that it's fairly short-lived and not a great number of events where that would occur. As we approach the concept design, we referred to the transportation plan that really was focusing on the pathway that comes along, what the pathway that's on the north side of the Joseph Street Playfield project that then connected to Meadow Street to head down south. There's now a pathway on the east side of the Playfield project that would provide a continuous pathway connection around that east edge of the pathway, across Joseph Street at Meadow intersection, continue on to the end of Meadow, and then through the Heron's Hideout path section that's currently constructed to a crossing of Mount U through the fairgrounds, back out to White Avenue, and then to this point of crossing. So the scope of the project really picked up from the fairgrounds entrance drive to that crossing location at Styner and Highway 8. So the concept design included both the underpass itself and its tie-in to the pathway on the south side of the highway, as well as a separated pedestrian pathway transitioning to a sidewalk facility there to provide a continuous connectivity to the fairgrounds center access drive. Their details is a little bit difficult to see, but the overall design of the underpass is a 10-foot wide facility with maintaining 8 feet of clearance from the bottom quarter of the bridge structure. Approaches are designed at 8% grades, both in and out from underneath the bridge structure, with a retaining wall required both on this upper side to adjust the grade break between where the path's coming up to meet with the existing road grade, as well as on the path side to support the path structure and the fill material required to create the path base. There are section details. These don't show up very well on the screen, but there are section details both for the downstream bridge crossing coming out the bridge structure section. This is on the upstream side of the bridge crossing, and then the separated pathway facility continuing on down to the fairgrounds property. As I mentioned, we also conducted Phase 3, which was a wetland delineation of the project. There were a few small wetlands that were identified, but the areas of disturbance are well under 1/10 of an acre, so no wetland mitigation would be required. So that does simplify the environmental permitting process for the project. As I mentioned, Phase 2 was to do a concept design and develop a cost estimate of construction. It's broken out into two components that are included in the cost estimate. The first was a base project that constructed the underpass with the path tying in, and then extended a pathway down to Hanson, which is the first street on the north side of White Avenue, just to the east of the intersection. That was a minimum point of transition where we could provide a crossing of White Avenue as well as a clear point of entry of cyclists and pedestrians into the facility. We added the pathway extension that then would pick up from Hanson to the fairgrounds as an additional project component. And that was estimated at $60,000, so $245,400 is really the total project cost estimate that was prepared by the consulting engineer on the project. So as overall, from the study's conclusions, the first of which is the underpass appears to be feasible and appears that it would not present any adverse flood impacts, which certainly is necessary for any type of work that would be happening in the floodway. The study does indicate that it would be inundated an average of 3.4 days per year, with an average inundation of just under 2 days. There are very limited wetland impacts and no mitigation required, so that does help streamline the permitting process. And as I mentioned, the construction cost estimate is $285,400 for the base project and $60,000 for that additional extension to the fairgrounds property. Having reviewed the project and some of the granting programs that are available, the city's grants coordinator has indicated that they feel that this is a good match for the Community Choices grant program. And so that certainly is a potential avenue that could be pursued to try to secure funding for the construction of the facility. So with that, I'll just wrap up my report, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that the council may have.
Wayne, Public Works and Finance Committee heard this on February the 9th.
Well, we did, Mr. Mayor. We looked at that and received basically the same information that Bill had. I clarified that there was going to be security lighting within the structure itself. We talked a little bit about what it was going to cost for maintenance when the creek did come up high and there would be mud and debris. And Tom Grundon indicated that just running the city equipment through there with a sweeper would sweep it off, so it's a minimal amount of maintenance itself that's involved for it. And with that, the committee itself, the Public Works and Finance Committee, did recommend approval.
Okay. Other questions for Bill? For
Okay.
John?
Did I miss, we've got the 285,000 and the 60,000 to complete the project for 345, and Alyssa is going to be working on trying to find some grant funding. What kind of match are we talking about?
The Community Choices Grant Program has a 7.65% match, so that would equate to about $26,000, a little over $26,000 on a project
Okay,
of this
that's what I
scale.
thought. All right.
Yeah.
I was not at all sure about this when it first was mentioned, but all of my questions have been answered, and I think we ought to move forward with it. So, one more.
Could you comment a little bit on the timing when that grant might come available and what potential year of construction we'd be looking at?
It's a little uncertain at this point in time. They're doing some adjustments to that grant program. I think the next round of funding that they're going to be calling for is for FY18, which for the state begins in July of 17, essentially is the beginning of their 18 fiscal year. So it was initially anticipated that the next round of Community Choices grant program would be open for applications in January. That has not yet occurred, and the current announcement on the webpage just says stay tuned. That's coming forward with some adjustments in the program for the FY18 round. So it would be a couple years down the road, which does allow for the city to accumulate some of that match funding over the next couple of fiscal years as well.
So Bill, we are right at the point with this where we've gone through this a number of times now, is to receive the report project and give direction to staff to seek out the grant through the community grant process. That's what you're suggesting? I mean, that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, we're reporting the findings of the study, and at this point in time, it's up to the council to decide whether you wish to pursue this, or if you wish staff to pursue grant funding to secure it, and obviously any match or any financial obligations would be reviewed during the upcoming budget process.
Okay, Wayne?
Margaret alluded to an article in the Daily News, an editorial, speaking against this particular project because of the extreme cost, $345,000. Whether it's city tax money or state tax money, it's tax money. And I tended to agree with a couple of points that Mr. Rosen made in that article, and that is that, and I've discussed this with folks that do utilize Blaine and cross Highway 8, and they indicated to me that they have no problem whatsoever crossing at the intersection because it's lighted, it has pedestrian lights for it, and other than morning and late afternoon when we have heavier traffic, it's really not an issue. In fact, they indicated to me that they probably wouldn't even go down and go underneath the bridge and go that way. They'd continue on that same route. However, as you go up Styner, there's a tremendous amount of people that live up in that area. There's a lot of apartments occupied not only by University of Idaho students, but there are some condos up in that area. And when those folks are trying to get across Highway 8 because they want to, whether it's Tesoro or whether it's McDonald's or whether it's the small shopping center east of McDonald's, those folks tend to want to cross at that intersection. They don't want to go up to Blaine and then double back. So I think that there is a safety issue that is involved with that particular segment of the population. I think we get to the old saying that you lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I certainly hope that we move ahead with this, and this is constructed, that those folks will then use that and not continue to try to walk across the highway when there's not even a crosswalk.